Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Secondary Math Pathway Information Night for San Leandro Unified School District.
Hola, bienvenidos a todos. Los queremos invitar al camino de las matemáticas en la secundaria el día de hoy. Gracias.
歡迎大家嚟到今日第二次嘅數學有關數學嘅資料嘅之夜。多謝你今日嚟到呢度。Thank you.
My name is Celine Liu. I am the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Educational Equity in San Leandro Unified, as well as a former high school math teacher. And I am looking forward to explaining to you the different opportunities and options students have in mathematics from 6th grade up to 12th grade.
Hola, mi nombre es Edith. Yo voy a ser la traductora de español. Voy a estar con ustedes el día de hoy. Vamos a hablar de diferentes técnicas y formas de cómo podemos ayudar a nuestros estudiantes con las matemáticas.
我係 Celine Liu，我係 San Leandro 校區教育部嘅總監。我以前亦都係一個數學嘅先生。今日我會解釋俾大家聽 San Leandro 校區提供嗰個中學嗰個課程。多謝。Thank you.
We'll go ahead and get started with the interpretation now. So you can see the directions on the screen. If you select the interpretation button, once I turn it on in a moment, then you will be able to select either Spanish or Chinese to have the information translated to you directly.
Ya vamos a comenzar la sesión. Van a poder ver el botón de interpretación. Pueden escoger el lenguaje que desean, ya sea español o sea en chino, para poder escuchar la interpretación del día de hoy.
我係李老師，係你今日嘅中文翻譯。如果你需要中文翻譯嘅話，我用廣東話翻譯，你可以撳一個嗰個地球儀，咁就會入到我頻道，可以聽到中文嘅翻譯。多謝 ，Thank you。
All right, so I'm going to turn on the interpretation. And okay, it looks like our interpreters are in the room and we're good. All right, so as we move forward through the night, you may have questions that come up. If you do, please add them in the chat box. If you need to add them in Spanish or Chinese, you can do that as well. And one of our interpreters will translate your question into English so that I can respond at the end of the information session. We'll also have time at the end of the evening for additional questions. This session is being recorded and will be shared to all of our schools to share out with all families for your reference and also for maybe your friends or neighbors who weren't able to make it tonight. So let's get started. I'm going to begin by talking a little bit about the California Common Core State Standards for Mathematics. These standards were adopted in 2010 by the state of California and written to prepare students for success in careers and college. We implemented them in San Leandro with an adoption of a new curriculum, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what these standards are. There are two main parts of the math standards in California. The standards for mathematical practice, which go from kindergarten through 12th grade, and content standards, which are specific to grades and courses. The standards for mathematical practice are what we sometimes call habits of mind. They are ways that mathematicians think. They are how we do mathematics. And there are 8 of them. And as you can see here, these 8 practices do not change from kindergarten to 12th grade, although how they look in the classroom will change. So for example, you'll notice that the first standard for mathematical practice is to make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. That is something that mathematicians do. Even when they come across a hard problem, they really try to break it down and make sense of it and keep trying to solve it, even when it's not easy the first time. But that's going to look different for a first grader who's learning how to add numbers than it's going to look for a sixth grader who's learning how to manipulate positive and negative numbers. And it's going to look different for a 12th grader in calculus who's trying to figure out how to solve calculus problems. And so again, even though those habits of mind don't change, those standards for math practice don't change, how they show up in the classroom shifts across the grade levels. Now, the other part of our California Common Core math standards are the standards for mathematical content. These are what you probably are familiar with when you have your students, when you see your students at home doing homework. So this is the what of every grade level and every course. There are certain areas of focus for every grade level or every course, and these really build on each other from year to year. So if a first grader is learning how to add two-digit numbers, then in sixth grade, they're starting to add positive and negative numbers. And then in high school, they're now manipulating variables and maybe adding and subtracting variables. And so everything really is connected to the content from the previous year. Now, I want to take a moment and explain some of the key characteristics of our California math standards. And this is important because when we teach math in San Leandro, we want to keep in mind the structure of the standards and the goal of what it is that we're trying to teach. So there are three major characteristics of our Common Core, California Common Core math standards. The first is focus. There is deeper focus on fewer topics. The second is coherence. That is that there are strong connections between grade levels and even within a grade level between topics. And the last one is rigor. And when we talk about standards, when we talk about the math standards, rigor means something very specific. It actually means that we're paying equal attention to procedural fluency, so how easily or quickly a student can do calculations, go through procedures. We talk about attention to conceptual understanding. So students need to understand why. So students need to understand why mathematics works the way it does. And then we also, when we teach students, pay attention to the application. So how can I take this learning and apply it to a different setting? I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. So before our California, these standards were implemented, there were a lot of topics. We wanted to expose students to the breadth of mathematics. And with the shift, what has happened is now there's much more focus on fewer topics. And here's a few examples of some of the big ideas that exist across certain grade levels. So you'll notice in elementary, some of the more basic operations with whole numbers, and then you start to see fractions. In middle school, you see ratios and proportions, and we actually start doing algebra in 8th grade math. And that was a big change with the Common Core and really important for us to understand. Even though it's still called Math 8, there's a lot of algebra that happens in that class. So this is an example of how the standards have coherence. You'll notice on the screen, these are different standards or what teachers teach your students in the classroom. And you'll notice the arrows show connection. So for example, this 6th grade standard around equivalent expressions, this arrow, and this is part of a reference map for how our different standards are connected. This arrow tells us that these two standards are very connected to each other, even though they are different ideas and different concepts. So even within just sixth grade, there's strong connections. And then you'll also notice that the sixth grade builds up to the seventh grade, which connects up to the eighth grade, which then connects up to the high school. So there's a lot of thought around making sure that there is alignment and coherence across all of the standards from kindergarten through 12th grade. And then again, this idea of rigor, which is very specific when we talk about the Common Core. And so that three-legged stool is a model for the emphasis that we place on those three areas. So really balanced emphasis on the conceptual understanding, the procedural skill and fluency, and the application. So with that background, then of course you're here to know, well, how does my student engage with all of that content? What are the classes that they can take in order to learn that material? And so I'm going to talk about that now. So in middle school, we have Math 6, Math 7, and 8. Math 8 in our standard pathway. These are integrated courses, which means in Math 6, Math 7, and Math 8, you have algebraic thinking, you have geometry, you have statistics, so lots of different kinds of mathematics, all within the same course. This map shows that in sixth grade, all of our sixth graders in San Leandro take Math 6. That's really important, and it's based on advisement from the California Math Framework, because in sixth grade, that's a big transition year from the more concrete mathematics of elementary school to some of the more abstract mathematics that students start to learn when they start learning more algebraic material. You'll notice also in this map, there's a star, and we talk about Math Lab. So in Math 6, Math 7, and Math 8, we also have Math Lab courses. Math Lab courses are classes that students take along with Math 6 or Math 7 or Math 8. And it's a way for them, for students to get a little bit of extra support in math. And so students are recommended for Math Lab based on test scores, based on grades, and based on teacher recommendation. For sixth graders, their fifth grade teachers make that recommendation. And then for seventh and eighth graders, it's the middle school teachers who make that recommendation. And students move in and out of those classes over the course of the year, because we don't want a student to be in that class if they don't need the extra support. And so teachers are monitoring progress in the Math Lab. And so when it seems that the student is making progress and is no longer in need of that extra class, then the counselors and the teachers look at the schedule and they make an adjustment. Now you'll also see on the second part of this pathway, we have a Math 7 8A and a Math 8B Algebra 1. This bottom part of our tree is our accelerated pathway. We call it a compression pathway because you'll notice that in 7th grade and 8th grade, students are actually taking 3 classes in 2 years. So they're taking Math 7 and part of 8th grade math. Then when they get to 8th grade, they're taking the rest of 8th grade math as well as the full year of algebra. And entering into this pathway is based on an application. There are test scores and grades and teacher recommendations involved. And I'm going to talk more about that application process and the criteria a little bit later on. Now in high school, we have various pathways, various ways that students can take math classes. What you see on the screen here is what we call our standard pathway. The large majority of our students take Math 8 in 8th grade. And so that's what you see at the beginning of this diagram. The large majority of our students then move into Algebra 1 in 9th grade, and then continue to move through a sequence. After Algebra 1, they take geometry, and we're excited because this year we hope to introduce a new class into our high school course catalog in the math department, and that class is called Data Science. We are taking this course of study to our board this month. And we are confident that it will be approved. This is a class that is offered throughout the state, in fact, and is also recommended by the California Math Framework as an important area of mathematics that's connected to 21st century skills and our students being really prepared for college and career when they leave San Leandro. So a student in geometry then has some choices. They could take advanced algebra trigonometry, or once the course is approved, they could take data science. Right now, data science also is able to get 3rd year math credit. So that means that either of these 2 classes would qualify students to be UC or CSU ready in their applications. We are waiting from some information about the 3rd year qualification from the UCs and CSUs. They have said that February is when they'll issue information on that. And so this pathway may be adjusted after that decision is issued, where data science would only be a 4th year course, but we're waiting to hear from the committee in order to make that decision. Right now, with the information that we have, a student could take geometry and then choose either data science or advanced algebra trig. And then you can see the different course options that they have after this. Now, we also have an intensive pathway in the high school. So for students who maybe were in Math 8 as well as Math Lab and have really needed some extra support, their teachers will recommend students to take what we call intensive algebra in the high school setting. And intensive algebra is an extension of the Algebra 1 course. So rather than taking Algebra 1 in 9th grade, students would take the intensive algebra and then enroll in Algebra 1 in 10th grade. I do want to note that Algebra 1 is a graduation requirement in San Leandro. And right now at San Leandro High School, you need 2 years of high school math in order to graduate. But the UCs and CSUs require 3 years. Counselors will speak more to your students about that, but I do want to mention that that is something to consider if your students are thinking about applying to a UC or a CSU. So this is an example of a high school pathway after middle school acceleration. So let's say a student took the 8B Algebra 1 in the accelerated pathway. Then, if they pass that class, they would move on to geometry in high school in their 9th grade year. And then you can see that the course choices are similar to the standard pathway, but what happens is the student would now have access to AP Calculus. So when counselors are meeting with students, especially in the high school level, they will review the credits that students have, the courses they've taken, the goals they have for college and career, and help students to make a decision about which next course is going to make the most sense for them based on what they're interested in and also based on prerequisites. So for example, if a student really wants to get into AP statistics, we have to make sure that they take advanced algebra trig right now, because that is a prerequisite before they take AP statistics. In San Leandro, we also have an opportunity for students to take algebra in the summertime after their 8th grade year. So there are some students, when they transition into middle school, they want to stay with the standard pathway, which is rigorous. I just want to emphasize the depth of the standards and how much they go into the conceptual understanding and application of the mathematics is extremely rigorous. However, there might be students who, after completing their Math 6, Math 7, and Math 8 courses, realize how much they love math. And so they want to accelerate and they want to be able to get to calculus by their senior year. And so we offer a summer algebra course. It is a full Algebra 1 course. It is very intensive. It happens in our summer school time. It is 5 to 6 weeks long, and it is approximately 5 to 6 hours a day. I'm going to speak more in a minute about the application process and criteria for that as well. Once students take the summer algebra course and they pass, then they would be eligible to also begin taking geometry in 9th grade, and then again, have all of those other options moving forward up into their 12th grade year. But what's significant here is that they are doing that acceleration in the summertime. This is just another example. If a student decides that they want to accelerate in high school, how they might do it. Maybe they're not able to take a summer class because they're working. And so there is an option to double up in classes. So for example, a student might be able to take Algebra 1 and geometry in their 9th grade year if they wanted. It doesn't happen a lot, but it is an option if students decide that they really want to advance up to calculus by the time they're a senior. And we do offer AP Calculus BC, which is equivalent to the second semester of college calculus. And so for a student to get to that level, this is just one example of how that could happen. So perhaps they take a summer algebra course, or maybe they were in the accelerated pathway in middle school, and then they take geometry in 9th grade. They move on to advanced algebra trigonometry in the 10th grade. And then maybe they decide to take a pre-calculus class over the summer. We do have some opportunities for online classes and summer community college classes, Chabot, for example, to take that pre-calculus class. And so then once they return and they have a passing grade, then they would be able to be scheduled into AP Calculus AB, which is a prerequisite then for AP Calculus BC. I'm just looking at the questions here briefly before I transition to the next section. So I see one question: can a 6th grader take a placement test in January to check if the student can take a 7th grade math grade while enrolled at the 6th grade year? Okay, so and then can you please repeat what you said about a 5th grade teacher making a recommendation? Let me go back to the Math 6, the middle school pathway. All of our 6th graders in San Leandro Unified take Math 6. A 5th grade teacher might recommend that a 6th grade student also be in Math Lab 6. So that would be the second math course that the student takes to get extra support in addition to their core math class. And then just the other question about the data science course: is it a concurrent class or a dual enrollment class. It is not. It is not a Chabot class. It will be offered at San Leandro High School, taught by San Leandro High School teachers. And it is, pending board approval, it would also be able to be offered at the virtual academy as well. Right now, our students who are enrolled at Lincoln High School take algebra or geometry. And in terms of our acceleration model, our decision points or our acceleration points are really after 6th grade, when a student can apply to go into the accelerated pathway, or after 8th grade, when a student would apply for that summer algebra course. There is no acceleration point in 7th grade. It is really important that a student experiences Math 8 because there is algebraic content in there before they take the algebra class. So I'm going to move ahead to now this really important piece of advice that actually I heard from a college professor who has, they've been doing research on what are strong predictors, not just of mathematical success, but college success. And one of their findings is no matter what math class they take, students who take 4 years of math in high school tend to do better in college. And even though colleges only require, like CSU and UC only require 3 years, what happens is there are general ed requirements in math when you go up to college. And so when students don't have that 4th year of math in high school, that can make it more difficult or challenging for them to be successful once they enter college. So I'm happy to say this because I was a high school math teacher, but it also is reflected by the research. For students to be more successful in college, it is highly recommended that they take 4 years of math, no matter what. Now, I know that there are probably a lot of questions from folks in this group around the acceleration. I'm already seeing some of them in the chat. And so I'm going to explain right now the criteria for being able to apply and enroll in our 7-8A course. That's that 7th grade course that covers Math 7 as well as part of the Math 8 curriculum. So what you see on the screen are the criteria that we look at when students apply to be in this accelerated pathway. The California Math Framework recommends that we look at multiple measures because we want to get the whole picture of a student's readiness to really move very, very quickly in a math class. And so we look at their Smarter Balanced Math score from the past 2 years. We look at their STAR scale score. Your students take the STAR math test at least 3 times a year. That is a district assessment in San Leandro Unified that helps us to measure and monitor student progress and growth in mathematics. And so we pull that data for students who are applying for the accelerated pathway. Students also take a readiness test or a placement test called the Math Diagnostic Testing Project. So this is a test that is very focused and specific on the topics in, it's focused and specific to tell us whether a student has mastered the Math 6 content and is really ready for Math 7. Now, why do we do a Math 7 readiness score? Because the indicators are that if they score highly there, then they are more ready for not just Math 7, but actually to accelerate and move into the Math 8 content as well. And then there is an application and teacher recommendation, which helps us to understand the student study habits and their readiness for acceleration. And that application does include a brief essay that students write about why they want to accelerate. Now, what you see here on the right is how we assign points to the application and how we determine whether or not students would qualify to be in the accelerated pathway. So for example, when a student, when we look at their Smarter Balanced score, we take the highest of the last 2 years of their Smarter Balanced. 4 is the highest they can get. And if they get a 4 on their Smarter Balanced, then we give them a 4 on their application. And we look at their STAR scale score. And depending on what that score is, the Renaissance assessment company has assigned different levels of proficiency. And so depending on the student's score, that tells us kind of where the student is in their grade level performance. And so depending on the score, we give them a 5, a 4, a 3, 2, or 1 towards their application. We also analyze the score from the MDTP test. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what these letters mean. But depending on how they score on this test, again, they get a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we analyze their application and also assign a score. We total up the student's score for all of the different categories. And then if their total application is between 16 to 18 points, then we recommend they move into the accelerated pathway. And then if they score less than 16, then we recommend that they take the standard Math 7 course. So again, this is all for 7th grade. Now, here, the MDTP, let me talk a little bit about what the A and B and A or B mean. So there are many different topics in the MDTP related to readiness for 7th grade math. We have selected 4 of those topics. And you can see here the number of questions that are possible on each of those 4 topics that are really important in the 7th and 8th grade math courses and fundamentally in mathematics. So in San Leandro, we have established proficiency levels in these topics. So if a student gets 4 out of 7 questions correct on fractions, they've demonstrated proficiency. And these are tied to the MDTP standards that the test writers have created. This is a test that comes out of UC San Diego. They have offices at UC Berkeley and other college campuses, and it's administered nationally for different mathematical assessment purposes. So we have proficiency levels on the 4 topics: fractions, decimals, integers, and proportions. Now, we look at the overall score of the test. We look at whether or not a student met proficiency on these key topics and on how many of the key topics. So maybe they met proficiency only on decimals, integers, and proportions. So that means that they would have met 3 out of 4 proficiency on 3 out of 4 topics. Or maybe they only really demonstrated proficiency on integers and proportions. So they met proficiency on 2 of the topics. What we do is in the criteria form, if a student has scored over 70%, 70% or higher, and they were proficient on 3 topics, that means they've achieved A and B. And so they would get a score of 5. In this example for this student, they got a 4 on their Smarter Balanced math score, which is the highest you can get. Their scale score on the STAR was somewhere between 1103 and 1135. So they got 4 points on their application. They either got 70% on their MDTP, or they had 3 out of the 4 topics mastered. So they got 4 points toward their application. And based on their essay, their application, their teacher recommendation, they scored a 4. So their total score is 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. Their total score is 16. This student would be recommended for Math 7 8A. Here's another example. The student got a 3 on the Smarter Balanced. Their score on the STAR was between 1048 and 1102. They either got 70% or met 3 out of the 4 topics. And they had a really strong application. This total score is 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, which is 15. Checking my mental math right now. And so this student would be recommended for the Math 7 pathway. Now, let's see here. Oh, we do have wait lists. And so when students apply, we hold on to the wait list, both based on space as well as based on the qualifications. And so just because a student maybe initially didn't get recommended for the course does not mean that they wouldn't necessarily be able to enroll. It depends on the space that would be available in the course for that to happen. If there are enough spaces after the students who qualified for the pathway are placed, then we may be able to take students from the wait list based on their particular score. But that happens after the initial placement process, once we see how many spots are available. So this is the criteria for Math 7 8A. Every 6th grader has an opportunity to apply for this course if they want. The criteria for summer algebra is very similar. We also look at the Smarter Balanced. We also look at the STAR. There's a different test that they take because they're going into algebra, but it's still the MDTP. And then there's still an application. And then similarly, we total up their application score, and you can see then how we make the decisions about whether we recommend that they should be placed in the summer algebra course or whether they should take Algebra 1, the full year of Algebra 1 in 9th grade. So this is the breakdown for the 9th grade readiness test. So this is for 8th graders who are applying to take the summer algebra class. It's very similar. We've identified some key topics related to algebra. For example, functions is a big idea that students start talking about in Math 8. But it's a key concept in algebra. And there are 4 questions on that readiness test related to functions. If students get 3 out of 4 correct, then they've demonstrated kind of proficiency. They've achieved a critical level. So our standards here are, we look at whether they met a minimum of a 60% overall. It's a very rigorous, challenging test. And remember, students, I mean, it's a readiness test, so there may be concepts or content that students haven't necessarily seen yet. And then we in San Leandro want students to have met the critical level on at least 3 of these 4 topics, right? Or maybe they've met proficiency on 2 of the topics. And so again, if we look at the matrix, we can see that if I just look at MDTP, if they scored 60% or higher and they got 3 topics mastered, then they would earn a 5 towards their application, and so on and so forth. Very similar to the 7 8A. I see just now there's a question about a date set for the MDTP. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the timeline for the remainder of the year for students who are interested in one of these options. So in February, and I'm talking about, so in February for 7 8A acceleration for your current 6th graders, The application will become available. In February or March, the test will be administered at Bancroft and Muir. The date is not set yet, and as soon as it is, we will share it out. We have to schedule that, but as soon as it's scheduled, we will let students and families know. Once they have that test and the application is then submitted, then the review of the applications will occur, and we will notify students and families about placement in March so that counselors at the middle school can also begin to place students into the master schedule for that class. For summer algebra, it's very similar. So for your current 8th grade students who are in Math 8, March is when the application will become available. That test will be given in March or April at the middle schools. As soon as we have those dates, we will send them out. And then we notify in April or May. And again, so students who don't meet the initial criteria may be placed on a waiting list as well. So I'm coming towards the end of the presentation, and I really am grateful for every person who's here joining this session, because you obviously care about your students' mathematical success. What I want to say is whether or not students accelerate, that everyone is a math person. Whether or not students take a math lab class in addition to their core math class, everyone is a math person. Our work here is to ensure that students are able to not just get the depth of learning, that is our responsibility to teach, but ideally we want students to leave our district and our classrooms feeling that they are a math person. I do a lot of trainings with teachers. I've done a lot of trainings with families. And if I ask people in the room, how many of you would say you're a math person? There's a lot of feelings about it. I wasn't good in math. I never got the right answers. I always was too slow when the teacher asked me a question, or it takes me a long time to solve a problem. None of that means that you're not a math person. So one of the things that we really want to ensure, again, whether you are in a math lab class or whether you're accelerating, because sometimes acceleration can be challenging. It can remove the love for the content because you're just really trying to keep up because there's so much information. A year and a half of math in 1 year, or even the summer course, a year of math in just a summer, right? That can be very fast, and we don't want to remove the love for the content. So this is a really important message for us. Everyone is a math person. So with that, I know that there are questions that I haven't answered yet in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and begin answering those. I will, again, be sharing out information. I'll be sharing out the slides as well as the recording of the session. And I will be updating all of this information also on the website, the San Leandro Math website. That'll be available to you to review as well. Currently, you would see the 22-23 slide presentation, application information, and deadlines there. As soon as we are done here, I will be updating that. And again, all of that will be sent out to your school so you can access it. So let me go ahead and go into the chat and see what other questions there are that I haven't answered yet. My son says that the STAR math test gave him a hard problem to do over 7th grade math. So the STAR math test is an adaptive math test. So that means that questions adjust depending on how students answer. If the student gets a question correct, then the question is going to get a little bit harder. And if a student gets the question and answer wrong, the difficulty of the question will get a little bit easier. So it may be that your student, they were in 7th grade, but they answered a question correctly that prompted the test to give them a math question that was over their level. So the STAR math test is an adaptive test. Students could get questions from well below their grade level or even well above their grade level, depending on how they answer. If a sixth grader gets bored with Math 6, can that student apply or request authorization to attend Math Lab, sixth grade or Math 7, when that student needs challenging Math 6 curriculum? Math Lab is a math support class. So students get, the classes are a little bit smaller. They get a little bit more attention to some of the maybe like previous skills that they need in order to be successful in that core math class, in the Math 6. If your student is bored with Math 6, the first thing I would recommend is that they speak to the teacher and let them know, because again, Eureka is a very rigorous, challenging curriculum. And we want to make sure that the student is being presented with all the opportunities that are there to dig deep. I will say, as a math major in college, that when I look sometimes even at Math 6 or even sometimes elementary math problems, because of the ways that we're asking students to really understand conceptually why an answer is what it is, not just what the answer is, even my brain has been stretched sometimes. And so that would be the first thing that I would do. If there are still questions, then it may be that it would be a good idea to call an SST meeting, a student study team meeting. Essentially, that is when students maybe need a little something extra, something a little bit different, because what's happening right now in their classes isn't working. But that really is something that happens in a conversation with the teacher, the administrator, the counselor, you, the family, to make sure that the student is being, their needs are being met. Does SLUSD have dates set for the MDTP test? Not yet. As soon as we do, we will share that out. How do I prepare a fifth grader for sixth grade math? Dig deep into fifth grade math. Again, with the coherence of the standards, fifth grade math mastery is essential in order to be successful in sixth grade. Now, there are lots of opportunities for students to practice on their own, related to both fifth grade math, you're talking about your fifth grader, but maybe other topics too. So there is Zearn, you may be familiar with that. That is a math program that's connected to Eureka, our math curriculum, and so they should be practicing there. We also have something called Freckle, which provides practice problems really targeted to where a student is. So maybe a student is strong in fractions, but maybe they really need some extra work thinking about data analysis. So what Freckle will do is it takes their STAR score, a student's STAR score, and it creates individualized assignments for them so that they can work on exactly the thing that they need to work on in order to get better in math. And actually, we have it for English language arts as well. You mentioned that MDTP is a national test. Can a sixth grader take the MDTP at home during Q2, or does it have to be done at school only? It is a proctored test that we administer in the school site. It is not accessible to the general public, so we have accounts and we have to set up the test in order to administer it. Just to confirm, it sounds like fifth grade parents and students don't need to do anything separate from tests in class. Is that correct? That is correct. Your fifth grade student will be placed into Math 6 automatically. If the teacher feels that they might benefit from Math Lab, they would make that recommendation, but you and your student don't need to do anything different than what you're already doing. Can you say a little bit about the pros and cons of taking an AP class versus taking the equivalent class at a city college through concurrent enrollment? That's a great question. AP classes are college level courses, as you know. Personally, working in a TK-12 district, and because I do professional development with our teachers, I know that our teachers get training on instructional strategies that are really important for students to learn the material. In community colleges, that may be true, but they have different training opportunities and potentially different ways of teaching. But also professors are different, teachers are different, and students are different. And so really it is an individual student decision, student and family decision based on your scholar and their needs and how they're successful. I can't say that one is necessarily better than the other, wholeheartedly. And I know you talked about kind of the pros and the cons of both. So either way, it depends on your student and the best ways that they learn. If they do take, the one last thing I will say is if they do take an AP class, and they take the AP test and they pass, they are able to get that college credit as well, depending on the college. And so both of them would have the opportunity to get that student that credit. If a high school student is college bound, but not sure what they want to study, how does the counselor determine what AP course is best? So whether it's AP statistics or AP calculus, that's a great question. I mean, that's a conversation, that depends also on what are the other courses that the student is taking. What else do they have going on in terms of extracurricular activities? Looking at the particular content of our AP statistics versus our AP calculus. Statistics tends to be more grounded, obviously, in data analysis. So some of that application. Sometimes, even though calculus is one of the most applicable areas of math, students can feel that it's very abstract. And so it also depends on your student, and their strengths and generally what they're interested in, even if they don't know specifically what they want to study. And frankly, regardless of which AP class they take, that is an indicator that the student is willing to take on challenge, willing to work hard. And so both of those are going to be good for their college-going career. Can I check my son's STAR math test score? If yes, how? You should be able to see it in Aries, in the test scores. And if not, email their teacher and the teacher should be able to respond. How does one access Freckle? It is available through Clever, through the Renaissance app. Your students all should know how to access Clever, and they all have taken Renaissance since they were in kindergarten, first grade. Every student takes it in San Leandro, so that's how they get to Freckle. And I will type it, but the person who wrote it there is correct. It's like the freckle on your face. This is Freckle. Let's see here. Should sixth graders study for the MDTP? It's hard to study for it beyond just reviewing what you've already covered in your class. So again, I would say just do your Math 6 work, right? Review it. Try to see if there are areas that you're not really sure about that maybe you want to get some extra practice on. But I wouldn't necessarily spend hours and hours preparing for it, because it is one test, and that's why we have multiple ways to measure students' readiness. How they do on it, we also take into consideration all the other ways that they show their math performance. My son is in 7th grade. If I want him to be in math lab, who can I speak to in school for more information about it? And is that an after-school class or one of their elective classes? So I would speak to their teacher first. And then, they might be connecting with the counselor as well, but definitely start with the teacher. And it would take the place of one of their elective classes. It's during the school day. Does a 9th grader should only do online community college courses only with Chabot? No, the counseling office has a few different options for online courses that students have taken. And so it is not only with Chabot, there are some other options as well. On the SLHS Counseling Department website, you can see some of those other ways that students can take classes. It looks like Adriana Fuentes asked a question in Spanish, but Edith, it looks like you answered it. Okay, thank you. If we have more questions regarding math pathways, should I contact 9th grade counselor or 6th grade counselor if my student is in middle school? Is there any math lab for freshmen? If you have questions about math pathways, you can contact, and your student is in middle school, you can contact the middle school counselor. And they will know in this information they are familiar with, and this will again be shared out with them. And yes, there is math lab for students who are in algebra as freshmen. Yes. All right, and that is just about perfect. We are almost out of time, and I think I've answered almost every question here. And so you can talk to your counselor. You can also email sanleandromath@slusd.us with any questions, and we will respond there. And again, these slides and the recording of the session will be sent out to all of our schools, elementary, middle, high school. And so you will be able to access this. We'll ask our schools to share it out via Parent Square. Hey, wonderful. I was worried I wouldn't get through the whole session, but we did. I see all the thank yous in the chat. Thank you so much for joining tonight. And I will stay on for just a couple minutes until 7 in case any other questions come up. But otherwise, have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope this was helpful for you. Let's see.